This is the Fire Dog Podcast.
The views and opinions presented on today's episode are those of the speaker and do not necessarily represent the views of the Department of Defense or the United States Air Force.
Welcome. My name is Ben Perry, here with Matt Wilson. Thank you for joining us for episode 21 of the Fire Dog Podcast. Our guest today is the fire chief at Beale Air Force Base in California. He's been in the Air Force Fire Service for 28 years. He has his Chief Fire Officer designation, a master's degree in leadership, and his department was recently named the Ralph E. Sanborn Department of Defense Fire Department of the Year. Please welcome Chief Kevin Smith. Welcome, Chief.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to do this.
Yeah, Chief, it's a pleasure to have you on. It's always great to talk to fire chiefs. It seems to be something that our listeners want to hear. They want to hear what fire chiefs have to say. So there's a lot of topics we want to dig into today. But before we start, I'd like to get a little background on yourself. Where are you from? And tell us a little bit about your career up to this point.
Awesome. I was born in Houston, but raised in Oceanside, California, the son of a Marine. My dad's a retired Marine off Camp Pendleton. So raised in Oceanside pretty much my whole life. Joined the Air Force and got lucky to be a firefighter. I was guaranteed job for cardiopulmonary resuscitatory specialist. Went in a little bit earlier than what I was supposed to. And my older brother, fun fact, my older brother was actually an Air Force firefighter as well. We were stationed at the same base, March Air Force Base, our first base. So we went through tech school. The day he graduated tech school was the day I started Block 1, Day 1. So pretty cool. Anybody out there that knows Brandon Anderson from back in the day, my older brother. And yeah, raised in Oceanside, came in the Air Force, stationed at March Air Force Base, went to the Air Force Academy from there, went to Sotocano, Honduras from there, went to went to Nellis from there, then went to Lakenheath, then Langley, and I retired off ACCIG at Langley. Married with 4 kids. My daughter, my oldest, is currently serving. She's the new and improved version of A1C Smith at Luke Air Force Base. So if any of you are at Luke and you walk into MPF, she will probably make your ID card. And I have 3 other children. All are in between junior high and high school. And my wife is actually retiring off of active duty in exactly 1 month from now. She is currently a health professions recruiter. So she did tier 1 recruiting and now she's doing tier 2 and prior logistics troop by trade. But so she retires 1 September. And so we're excited about that. We did a geographically separated marriage for 11 years. The Air Force will do that to you sometimes. And so now we're finally under the same roof and it looks like my house is not a bachelor pad anymore, as she would say. So I work at Beale Air Force Base. I work for 60 amazing firefighters. I come to work every day. I have a lot of fun. I laugh a lot. We're big on professional development. We're big on education. We're big on knowing your job, being able to respond. We have a lot of wildland fires on base. A few years ago, CE building burnt down. So Beale's not the sleepy hollow that people think it is. We rock out pretty well. And yeah, that's it. I'm wearing a Wu-Tang shirt, so I'm a Wu-Tang fan.
Were you the fire chief for the CE building fire?
Actually, I was not. I was the assistant chief of operations. When I retired from the Air Force, I got hired as the assistant chief of operations at Beale. And the fire at CE happened February 20th, Martin Luther King Day, February 20th, 2013. And I got hired at Beale September 11th, 2012. So the first thing I thought when I pulled up to the CE building was that I'm getting fired because I'm still under probation. And yeah, it was crazy. Everyone knows that you don't have the staffing that you would normally have on a holiday based on con ops. And so, yeah, I was the AC of ops, ran that incident.
Oh, first on scene and everything.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. What happened with that? I'd never read the story.
It was electrical, more or less, in the alarm shop. Go figure, right? So It started in the alarm shop of CE. And, they had everything in that building. It was a pretty large size building. So they had all the CE crafts. They had all the drafting paperwork from the mechanical and electrical and the other engineers. So all of their documentation, their maps, they had Power Pros equipment, small engine, all the small engine stuff that they had for Power Pro. They had structures, all the carpentry stuff, the wood. So it was a pretty heavy duty fire. And by the time we got there and started mitigating, it was it was lost before we even started.
So more than one facility. It was a couple of different facilities.
No, that was one facility. It was just very large, the
Just a
CE
really
compound
big facility. Okay.
Yes,
I've
sir.
seen pictures of the building. It looked huge.
It was
really
massive.
Big. I imagine you guys needed help from mutual aid.
We had about 15 engines to include three other ladder trucks come in from the city. Beale is really, really lucky. We work with our partners off base a lot. Matter of fact, we just sent a strike team out. They just came back yesterday. We had a strike team go out for 7 days for the gold fire up by Susanville, California. I think it was about 30,000 acres burned. So we sent strike teams out, and it's super awesome. The experience that you would get on a strike team working with the divisions through CAL FIRE and OES and all that stuff. It's just something that you really don't get except for a few bases like Vandenberg and maybe the Air Force Academy and a couple other places. So if you want to fight fire, especially wildland, Beale's the spot.
Yeah, we did a little bit when I was in Elmendorf. What are your strike teams? What's the makeup? Are you guys sending engines? Are you part of a structural protection team?
One Type 3 engine and 3 people at a minimum on that engine. And you're right, 𝗍𝗶𝗆 does do a whole lot of wildland fire as well. But yes, one engine, Type 3, and then 3 personnel on that engine. So, and they'll go out anywhere from 1 day to 14 days. And it just depends on how long the incident is, but it's no longer than 14 days. Then they'll release that strike team and bring another team in to replace them for R&R.
Civilians too?
Yes, sir. I just sent a battalion chief out, or station captain as the Air Force call it, but we're on the West Coast. I just sent a battalion chief out with an airman, an A1C, and another civilian.
So do you send a senior fire officer too? It's just 3 people to operate the engine?
I don't normally send a senior fire officer. It's just who I happen to have, and I want to get him experience on his task books. So if you're at 𝗍𝗶𝗆, you know that you have to get those NWCG task books signed off. The best way to get those NWCG task books signed off is to go on a strike team because of the experience that you get in that, 5 to 14 day period. You don't get that on base. 𝗍𝗶𝗆 is just not burning like that, or Vandenberg or Beale. So you get those strike team, that experience, and you send a chief fire officer out, and their task books get signed off pretty quickly.
Yeah, you need things to burn to be able to complete them. You have to see fire. It's like conduct the size up on a fire. Well, something's got to burn before I can do that. So
Right.
Well, Chief, you mentioned in your intro that you in your department take professional development pretty seriously. You've got a pretty impressive resume yourself, having your chief fire officer designation and your master's degree. So we'd like to kind of pick your brain. What's some advice you'd like to give the listeners when it comes to professional development? How do they take the next step if they want to up their game?
So with the CPSC, as you guys mentioned opening, that they have a fire officer designation, they have a chief fire officer designation, they have a chief training officer. So there's different designations that you can get. You don't have to be a fire chief to get the fire officer designation, more or less a crew chief. And I look at this because I ask people all the time as they're trying to get promoted through Air Force Fire or DOD Fire or even civilian fire departments for that matter. If you go on Indeed.com right now and you look and see there's a job opening to be an assistant chief in the city of Houston, they're going to require you to have a bachelor's degree, and they're going to require you to have some kind of credential, whether it's CFO or the state fire marshal's credential or something equivalent. It's a requirement for them. It's not a requirement for us, but in my opinion, it should be highly recommended based on the fact that who hires fire chiefs? And that's a question for you guys. And it's rhetorical.
Commanders?
Absolutely. What do commanders value? Education.
That you know what you're doing?
They value that you know what you're doing. Absolutely. Yeah. That's the number one thing that they should value. But they do. They value education because all of your commanders in Air Force CE are educated, right? They have it a minimum. They mostly, if you're a lieutenant colonel or a major in CE, you have a master's degree. They also value credentialing because they get what's called PE, professional engineers. So when you have some letters behind your name, they understand the value of that. Now, disclaimer, I want to tell everyone, getting a degree or getting credential does not make you a better firefighter. There are way better fire chiefs out there than Kevin Smith that have none of this stuff. There are way better firefighters out there that do not have a degree or don't have credentials. So it doesn't make you better. But what it does make you is a little more marketable when it comes time for promotion, or if you want to move, or if you're retiring from the Air Force and you're ready to take that next step to get a job somewhere. When do you start separating the herd? And that's what you have to start looking at. For you guys as senior NCOs, the herd is separated, right? When you start testing for senior, they start looking at certain things. Why is that? They don't want a guy or girl to come into that senior NCO tier as a senior master sergeant or chief master sergeant, and you're developing documents now. And if you don't know the difference between there, and there, or 2 and 2, it really looks bad when you're sending these documents up to people that are educated. And that's where you see all those red pen marks come into play.
Well, and it conveys that you're serious too, I think, that you've invested the time and the energy to put into something other than something that's required.
Yes. And I'll tell anyone, sir, that getting a bachelor's degree or master's degree is not hard. It's time consuming, but it isn't hard. Any one of us that have taken an ASVAB or done CDCs or promotion tested or anything like that, we've studied to do that. Getting a degree isn't hard. It's just extremely time consuming. Getting credentialed, if anyone out there wants to get credentialed and you have a bachelor's degree and you can go category A, shoot me an email, Kevin.Smith.150@US.AF.mil, and I will talk you through the entire package. And you could probably get it done over a lunch break if you were serious, over a lunch break. So I'm all about giving back. The letters behind my name have nothing to do with me being a better chief. It has to do with I'm going to get it done. And so I'm willing to help anyone else that wants to get it done as well, including the people in my department. I want people in my department to be the most eligible people for the job in your department that they can be. Because they can't beat somebody that's already at your base that's working because they have that familiarity. And so if I know that the Beale guy is coming in ahead of the curve with some of this stuff that looks sexy on their resume and they can firefight, I've just brought a contender to the table to get a job or a promotion in your fire department.
So is that the kind of bulk of what your professional development is centered around? You use that as kind of a mold to deliver to your firefighters, or do you have, multiple other things that you pull out to help professionally and personally develop your firefighters there?
Oh, multiple things. I believe in going to conferences. I sent one of my battalion chiefs to a wildland conference up at Reno a couple of years ago. In my opinion, that's professional development because you're mingling with other professionals within the career field that aren't specific to Air Force or DOD. And he brought back the ATAC system, which some of you guys have worked with or you've seen it. But the ATAC is an Android type system, and it's more or less a common operating picture for a fraction of the price of what the Air Force is paying for it right now. Professional development can be doing CDCs. One thing you want to remember if you're looking at someone's resume and the last time they did some type of CDC or some type of class or anything, some type of conference was 8 years ago. When you look at their resume and you go, what have you been doing since then? So that's what I like to tell people. You got to take a break. Also, you got to enjoy your family. Take a break. Don't grind all the time. But hey, if you got to dust off your resume, you haven't done anything for 3, 4, 5 years, 6 years, go enroll in the CDC. They're free. Everyone in Air Force Fire Protection can do a CDC for free. So to me, that's professional development. Professional development would be teaching a class. If your expertise is ropes and knots, go teach a class. That's professional development. To me, your professional development is also using your education to help the department move forward. If you have a kinesiology degree, why aren't you in there helping a guys learn how to lift properly or diet appropriately? We want to make it from cradle to grave, and we have a rigorous career field. So go execute. If you have a degree in theology, a lot of us know that we have some mental health issues. We just don't talk about it. But if you have that theology degree and you study the ministry, go help out your fellow airman or go help out that civilian that's going through that rough divorce. So that's my take on the education and credentialing. It's just not about getting a credential or going to school to get your bachelor's degree or master's degree and whatever. Use it, execute that degree to help your department or help your coworkers or help the fellow firefighters in Air Force Fire Protection.
And a bonus is you don't have to pay for much if you're in the Department of Defense or the Air Force, if anything, really. You don't have to pay anything pretty much up until your bachelor's degree, and a lot of stuff beyond that. You'll probably have to pay a little bit if you want to go after a master's or beyond that. But
if you are on active duty, there's schools that you can use your TA to cover your complete master's degree.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Amazing. My wife just finished her master's degree at Western Kentucky University, along with several other firefighters that are doing it right now. I'm not going to name drop them, but there's several firefighters that are doing it right now. And TA covers 100% of their master's degree. Yeah, and little do people know, a master's degree can be as little as 10 classes. 10 classes. That's all it takes. If you're an Air Force civilian, you get 75% tuition assistance paid for, even through your doctorate degree. So you can go and get a PhD, and the Air Force will pay 75% of that. So when people tell me that I don't have the money to go to school, it's not the money. You don't have the time, maybe. But again, there's other people out there that are doing it that have less time than you do. So where are you prioritizing?
Right. There's really not too many excuses. Some people have legitimate excuses, but should be going after that stuff if you have the opportunity. I'd like to switch gears a little bit, Chief, given the current events surrounding race relations and equality in America, and specifically with African Americans. I'd like to get your thoughts on the topic. So at any point throughout your career, did you sense any, or did you have any experience with any barriers for career progression?
Not necessarily career progression. I've had some, I had a specific incident at a specific base. And I can't say any names necessarily, but I was called the N-word by the leader of that department, and in front of a large audience at the time, and all over a misunderstanding. And this was in the mid to late 90s. So it's one of those things where you think to yourself, wow, is this really happening? It's 1998. And so it's when you look at race relations within America today, you see a large divide with who supports what and who's down with what. And you even see it transitioning down to the fire service. And I don't think the Air Force has a very good promotion system, especially if you're on active duty. It seems like it's faceless, which is awesome. It would be great if it was nameless as well, so we can capture some of the females in our career field. And I know that Chief Wagner and Chief Morris are really getting after that. And it makes my heart warm that that's something that they're looking at. But I'll throw the grenade out there. How many Pacific Islander fire chiefs do you see out there in the Air Force?
Yeah, I can't think of any off the top of my head.
There's two that I know of. How many female fire chiefs or deputies, for that matter, do you see in Air Force fire?
We talked about
or military?
We talked a little bit with Chief Wagner on that, and I don't think there's any.
How many black fire chiefs do you see in Air Force fire protection?
Well, there's you. I don't know of any others.
There's three. So when you look at the scope of how large our career field is, and you look and see, and you've probably met some really sharp female firefighters that can be great deputies or chiefs, or Pacific Islanders or Hispanics or anyone for that matter. Not to take away from any other race to say that they shouldn't be recognized because of this or that. But when you look across the board and you see some of the sharp individuals, you have to ask yourself, why are they not progressing or leaving the career field as a whole? So that's one of the questions I've asked myself for a long time. Why aren't these people progressing? And sometimes it's not the system. Sometimes it's the individual. I don't want to leave Tyndall because this is where I'm at, and I'm going to retire as a battalion chief at Tyndall, knowing I have the opportunity and the capability to be a fire chief. So sometimes it's that, but sometimes it's the good old boy system that just won't let you progress. So when I got promoted, I heard a rumor that I got promoted to the fire chief because my current fire chief at the time was black and the CE commander was black. Now, so a hard question I'll ask is, if you were to get promoted to fire chief in your department tomorrow, would somebody walk around and say, no, the only reason Matt got promoted is because his commander's white and his current fire chief is white? Yeah,
probably not. And Chief, you're asking us a lot of tough questions here. We're supposed to be asking the questions.
I know. Who's doing the interview here?
No, I can understand that. And I can't understand it, but I can see the frustration. Yeah, anytime a female progresses or is promoted or gets an award.
Did she just get it because she's a female?
Right. The first question is always, oh, it's because she was a female, or is that why it happened? Which, if I got the same thing, they wouldn't question it. Most of the time, I don't think.
So is that some sort of bias that we're looking at within the career field?
Certainly, yeah.
Yeah. So I would be the first to say that racism in the career field is not as prevalent as it is in society as a whole, or in the Air Force for that matter. But there's definitely some bias within Air Force fire protection and the Air Force in general. And the biases have to be recognized, and people have to accept that the biases exist in order to say, how do we move on? How do we work on these biases? Did I get promoted to the fire chief because my CE commander was Black and my previous fire chief was Black? Maybe, but the person that hired me was the group commander, who was white, and his deputy, a civilian, white guy. So the more people know, the more they understand that, well, maybe this didn't happen the way that I think it did. But my question to people is, why was it even a question anyway?
Right.
I've never questioned anybody that got promoted based on their skin color.
Yeah. So what are some practical steps? What are some things you do within your department to make sure that there is equal opportunity and there is less bias? I mean, you can't get rid of all bias, but what are some practical things people can do?
I tell a story, and I told the story on Facebook, and I got some feedback from it, positive and negative, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to get it again. I was not the shiny penny coming through Air Force fire protection when I was wearing stripes. I just wasn't. And it wasn't because my leadership didn't take care of me. My leadership took more care of me than I can ever ask, for the most part. I've had some bad ones. I've had some good ones like everyone else. But my leadership throughout fire protection through my 28 years has been phenomenal. But I wasn't your shiny penny. I wasn't the guy winning all the awards or anything like that. But because I wasn't the shiny penny, did that make me any less valuable than a shiny penny? So a penny's worth is a penny's worth, right? There's one penny is worth one penny, whether it's the dullest penny in your piggy bank or whether it's the shiniest penny in your penny. It's all going to spend the same way. So if you invest in people with that philosophy that even your dull penny at some point has the same value than your shiny penny, and you can execute and get them to respond based off of, hey, I realize you have value, sir, ma'am. I realize your value. It may not be as shiny as this other penny is, but you still spend the same way. Your worth is still the same. Whether you're Black, white, female, male, Native American, whatever, from the South, from the North, from California, your value is all the same to me when I walk into the department. And my biggest thing is, I work for you. When you walk inside Beale Fire Department, you don't work for me. I work for you. So my job is to ensure that you know your value and your worth when you come to work every day.
Yeah, that's great advice.
That's what I do.
And everybody's good at something different too. And so, yeah, a shiny penny or a dull penny, they're good at different things. And so you can leverage their talents in different ways. It takes all kinds of kinds.
Now you're going to have that penny that just it can't be spent anymore. It has no more value left to it. And the Air Force does a really good job of separating individuals that don't have the worth to the Air Force that's needed to continue to do the mission.
But of course, doesn't mean that people, they're still valuable members of society, whether or not they belong in the Air Force or not.
Absolutely. Don't throw them away, because they do have value, whether it's outside the Air Force doing something else. You're right. So they do have value.
I always tell people that people that seem to be motivated to leave the Air Force for whatever reason, and I don't judge anybody. If it's not your thing, it's not your thing. If firefighting is not your thing, it's not your thing. But do the best job that you can do right now, because right now you're creating your reputation, or you're building reputation, because you're gonna ask people for things eventually, for references or for advice or whatever you need, or use your education. So do the best that you can do now so that you set yourself up for success for what you want to do.
That's a good point. I didn't have the best reputation coming through Air Force fire protection when I was an airman and a staff sergeant and tech sergeant for that matter. I did not want to be in Air Force fire protection up until I was a seasoned tech sergeant. That's when I said, this is the greatest job on earth. So I know that throws a lot of people off, but I'm very honest when I say that, because people are like, oh man, I bet you want to be a firefighter from the day you were born. No, I did not. I wanted to be a firefighter as a seasoned tech sergeant. That's when I realized what this craft was about. So I'm glad that my supervisors and my mentors back then did not throw me away because I wanted to be in contracting or I wanted to be in work in the hospital or something like that. And a lot of people do that. Oh, you don't want to be a firefighter? You're not worth anything to the Air Force. Well, you are. You just might not know that you're worth something to fire protection at that time. So I thank my mentors and my supervisors that were patient with me.
And we all have different buy-in times in our careers. Some people, it's before you came in, you knew you were all in before you ever signed on the dotted line. Some people, it's, after you get to your first base and you realize what it's all about. And some people, like you said, it's not until you're a tech sergeant. Hopefully it's not until you're a senior chief before you realize where you're supposed to be.
Right.
But I think everyone's got their different kind of aha moment where they realize, hey, this is who I am. This is what I want to be. Right. I have a conversation with my wife often about rabbit trail for a second about separating work and home life. And I tell her it can't be done. It is one life. I live one life. I think about work when I'm at home. I think about home when I'm at work. I think about dessert when I'm eating dinner. I mean, I can't compartmentalize life like that. So I don't remember where I was going with that, but
I can understand that. Me and my wife have had that conversation recently over the last couple of days because my phone has been ringing a lot. She's like, "You're always working," and I was like, "It's normally not like that. I try not to bring it home after 4:30. I try not to bring any of that home, but." Yeah, she always says that I should get overtime, but it's not. A lot of times it's not just work, Ben. It's more or less I'm talking to friends throughout the career field that are asking me questions like, hey, what does your SOC say when it comes to this? Or I'm talking to some of my mentors because I've had a rough day and I'm calling Chief Donan and I'm like, or Chief Thompson or Chief K from Fairchild and saying, hey, what do you guys think about this? I've had this happen today and I just don't know. And that's work. And I'm at home while I'm doing that because sometimes it's hard to do at work, but you're right.
Where you move from paycheck to passion, right? Like I'm doing it to clock in or I'm doing it because I love doing it. Obviously, Matt and I don't get paid for doing this, but we love it, because it can further the career field. It gives us a sense of satisfaction. We get to talk to awesome people like you. But we're not getting paid anymore for it. It's passion,
And I do remember, Matt, when you pitched this at AFB, I was sitting in there when you pitched this and seeing it come to life, seeing you guys' ideal come to fruition from what you pitched in AFB. This is amazing because it's I've listened to your podcast and there's a lot of stuff out there that the information just might not be getting. When Jeff Wagner talks, sometimes that information isn't getting translated to the people that are riding trucks. And I know that he's a good communicator. He wants that information to be translated to everyone within Air Force fire protection, but it just doesn't get there. This podcast is a medium to get that there. So kudos to you guys, but back on track.
All right. Well, we'd like to talk kind of the meat and potatoes about why we brought you on. We'd like to talk about the U-2 crash that happened there in September 2016, there around Beale Air Force Base. Like you said, we were in the fire superintendent course back in December, and I heard you tell the story there. And that took a few hours for you to get through. And I'm sure that probably only really scratched the surface. If I remember right, it was a pretty long, complex incident, had a number of challenges associated with it. But for the sake of time, would you mind summarizing kind of what happened and then talk over some of the lessons learned?
Yeah. You as an old IG guy, we always practice for emergencies that happen on base, particularly on the airfield, right? That's just what we do because that's our comfort zone. And it's hard to go off base and talk to your off base partners to coordinate something like that. But I would like to say a good portion of your aircraft incidents that happen in Air Force fire protection are probably going to happen off base. I've seen them happen on the flight line at Nellis, but a good portion of those could happen off base as well. So this incident happened on September 20th. And it happened probably about, I want to say 30 miles outside the gate from Beale, 25, 30 miles in the foothills. So some really good information taken from that incident was we went the wrong way the first time because we got dispatch going towards Chico. And if anybody knows the area of Beale, as you're going towards Chico, the aircraft was actually in the buttes. And we were going the complete wrong way. So now we look like a circus clown, turning all of our apparatus around, trying to get to the incident. But we called the local fire chief that was out there at the time, and I'm talking to him. He's like, "Hey, man, I have no idea what this thing is. Can you please come and put this out?" So we get there, we realize that there was some wildland fire caused from the aircraft. There was some brush caught on fire. So I think it was a couple of 100-acre wildland fire as well. And we could not find the hydrogen canister from the U-2. So immediately we put our heads together and we started thinking. We let the civilian fire chief, we made him, basically we did kind of like a mutual command type thing. And we let him run the wildland fire. We had to try to keep his wildland firefighters out of the area because they wanted to go mitigate around the aircraft. And we're trying to explain to them, A, we have a hazard out there because we don't know where the hydrogen is. B, whatever this aircraft's burning off, as far as what it's made of, this could be hazardous because when you're fighting wildland fires, you're not wearing SCBA. So they didn't understand that for a little bit. And then they finally got it. And they're like, oh, okay, we'll withdraw people. And pilot was missing, and the student pilot was missing. So normally your U-2s are one-seaters. This was a two-seater because Beale is the only Air Force Base CONUS that trains U-2 pilots. And so this was a two-seater. One of the lessons learned for us was keep aircraft out of the area if possible when that plane goes down, because it's going to cause a lot of confusion for some other things that are trying to happen in the area. So we had local aircraft flying. We had CHP flying. We had CAL FIRE flying, dropping airdrops on the wildland fire. And we had somebody from the base flying a T-38 to do surveillance because we couldn't find one of the pilots. The student pilot, we actually found him. He had a broken tib fib and some other things going on. And he was transported to UC Davis. And there's something with that story as well. But the other pilot, Lieutenant Colonel 𝗍𝗽𝗍𝗍, the seasoned pilot, we couldn't find him. And so we actually leveraged CHP to take my deputy up, Senior Master Sergeant Mark Belton at the time. He took Sergeant Belton up, and we spotted the pilot, and we went, they lowered Belton down, and we covered the pilot with an American flag because he was open for everyone to see, and there was other aircraft flying around. Crazy story. My wife was stationed down at Long Beach at the time. And so she calls me and she says, "Hey, I see a pilot or airplane went down in your area." And this is 15 minutes into the incident. So I'm thinking, how does the news know about this already? But we live in an age of technology. And so just know that not only the news is probably going to be telling the rest of the world what's going on at your base, your firefighters are going to be telling the rest of the world of what's going on your base. Because about 15 minutes after my wife calls, I'm getting calls or text messages from friends in Japan, in Germany. You guys know about it. And so I'm like, how does everybody know about this? But word travels fast when we all have our digital assistants in our pockets, right? Our cell phones. So people are breaking out those digital assistants and taking pictures of the U-2 and of the damage. And so we had a P23 that we asked to come out to the scene. And the P23 actually, the brakes caught on fire as it was coming out to the scene. The P23s, I don't think they're made to drive long distances, especially now that they're aging. And that was one of the things that the EOC director at the time started questioning. Well, do our firefighters have the training that they need, blah, blah, blah. And thank God I had an amazing commander at the time. And my commander basically shut that down instantly. And I will say his name, Lieutenant Colonel John Volchek, one of the most amazing people ever. And he completely shut all that down. And he said, "Hey, look, your firefighters are professionals and they're out there killing it. And so don't ever question them." So
what does a brake fire have to do with not being trained? I don't understand the connection.
I don't either. I wish I could answer that, but I don't understand the connection either. There was no connection. It was more or less, when something like that happens, fingers start getting pointed. And we even do it to ourselves. It was the first thing I said when the CE building caught on fire and I was on the job for 90 days. I'm about to get fired. So finger pointing gets really easy when an incident happens. And that's one of the things that you have to deal with as a chief fire officer is some fingers are going to start getting pointed. Mm-hmm. So I tell everyone all the time, my thought process is different on how I do business every day. I do business from a legal perspective. I tell everyone, if I go to jail, am I going to be able to explain this? Or I am not going to jail. So we need to be able to articulate this as best as possible because I'm not going to jail. So I think a lot of people kind of just do stuff passionately, but I try to look at stuff a little more on a legal perspective to say that it doesn't flow the way it's supposed to flow, so it doesn't make sense. So once we found Colonel 𝗍𝗍, it was a bad situation because he had perished. So now we have a recovery. We have a hazmat with the hydrazine, we have a wildland fire, and we have an actual aircraft crash. So 4 incidents at once. It got a little hairy. One thing that we always have issues with is food, force support. I love my force support brothers and sisters, but one of the things that we haven't figured out yet completely as a career field, us and them, except for 𝗬𝗃𝗃. 𝗬𝗃𝗃 does have it figured out, is the food portion of it, water. So, yeah, it was.
Yeah, Chief, I don't know if you want to hit on that a little bit. What you were talking about it on the all call that we had for senior fire officers the other day, and you'd mentioned some legal review.
Yep. Chief Donan, guy's brilliant, absolute genius. He did a legal review, and not only does he have the coordination through FSS, Chief Donan can have his logistics NCO go out and actually purchase food on GPC card. That's amazing. Because at the end of the day, if something happened on Beale right now, I'm probably going to hop in my pickup truck and go up there and buy a bunch of Little Caesars pizzas on my own dime. But Chief Donan's actually figured it out through a legal review. And if anybody wants the paperwork, either contact me or Chief Donan at 𝗬𝗃𝗃 and get a hold of this paperwork. And he's gone through the process of doing a legal review, and the wing commander has signed it off saying that, yes, I give you the authorization, fire chief, to buy food and or beverages based on a contingency incident. So, yeah.
Is that the biggest call you've been on in your career, the U-2, or, is that the pinnacle, or is it one of many large calls? Or I know you're part of the disaster crew, so.
Yeah, the disaster crew, it's kind of a blessing and a curse to have that name or be associated with that group. When commanders hear about stuff happening while you're on your watch, sometimes it might make them a little reluctant to hire you. But guys like JT and Chief Donan and Chemo don't have a problem with that. This is not the biggest call I've been on, or it's one of the biggest calls I've been on as a fire chief. But it's not. I was at 𝗬𝗨 for 6.5 years, and anybody that's been at 𝗬𝗨 knows that you're probably going to average about 1 plane crash a year at some point. I was there for 6.5 years and saw a few plane crashes while I was there. I was at March Air Force Base in the mid-90s when our bowling alley burnt down. I was in Honduras right after the big hurricane came through, so to clean up for that. I was at Langley when we had a few pretty good nor'easters. And I didn't know what a nor'easter was, being a California guy coming to the East Coast, so a couple of nor'easters. And yeah, so it's pretty good incidents in my career. And I guess the disaster crew is wearing that badge is a badge of honor, but it also could be a badge of failure depending on how you see it.
So your portfolio is pretty full at this point. So maybe you're done with the big incidents, hopefully, I guess for the public's sake, at least.
That was me knocking on wood.
Yeah.
Well, you still have your job,
Yes.
and you definitely have all that experience to lean on, which is great. So those two things right there are pretty cool. So I'd like to talk a little bit about leadership with you. I know we hit professional development and how kind of you lead within your department. I'd like to expand on it if we could a little bit, considering you have a master's degree in leadership. I mean, 28 years worth of experience in the fire service, all the major incidents that you've experienced, and your department was recently recognized as the Department of Defense Fire Department of the Year for 2019, which is an incredible accomplishment.
Thank you.
What is your leadership philosophy? How do you motivate people to be so successful?
This is another kind of story. So I was sitting with my AC of prevention one day, Dr. 𝗘𝗽𝗋𝗋. A lot of people might know of him or know him. Awesome guy. Right now he's the deputy at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba for the Navy, with return rights back to Beale. But we were talking about something, and I said, you know what, man? I said, I am like the light person in a symphony or a play. I said, if you think about it, the light person, pretty important, right? Because without the lights, there's no show. but you don't know who the light person is. They get no credit for anything. And that's really the way leadership in fire protection should be. You should be the person behind the scenes making things work and making them as smooth as possible. You want to make sure that the right actor gets the right light at the right time, or the entire show gets the proper lighting that it's supposed to get at the right time. So that's my leadership philosophy. I don't want credit for anything. I don't need credit for anything. What I do want to do is shine the light on the department and the people within the department to get the credit that they deserve, because they come to work every day. And some of those guys, like some of us came in open general, and they might not want to be a firefighter. So they deserve the spotlight because they're doing something that they don't want to do. It's hard enough to do this job when you want to do it. It's even harder to do it if it's not your passion or you don't want to do it. So they deserve the spotlight. So that's one of the things that I talked to Dr. Waddell about was I'm a lighting guy. Light goes off at the play, everybody's mad. Now they want to know who the light guy is. But as long as the lights stay on and the show goes on, that light person is a pretty critical member to that team. So I also believe in inverted leadership. And I think I might have talked about this at AFB a little bit. But inverted leadership is more of if you think about a pyramid like this, the leader on top, well, inverted leadership, that pyramid, that leader goes to the bottom. So that's why I tell everybody in my department that I work for them, not the other way around. So I work for the assistant chiefs and the battalion chiefs in my department. They work for the line firefighters in the department and the dispatchers and whatnot. And then my firefighters actually work for the community, whether on base or off base. That's who they work for. That's who they have to answer to, is the community. So ultimately I have to answer to the community as the chief, but that's why they respond to emergencies. They're answering to the community. So I feel like if my job is to give them all the support, whether it be manpower, resources, professional development, classes, whatever they need, that's my job, is to do that for them. My job isn't to come around and tell them that, hey, there's a piece of trash in stall 3 where the P23 is parked, go pick that up. It's not my job to tell them to do that. If I'm walking by a piece of trash in stall 3 by the P23, I'm going to pick that trash up because for whatever reason, I'm going to assume that people in the department are doing other things that they need to do. And it's just a misstep that somebody walked by it. But that's the way that I see leadership in a nutshell.
I think you answered my follow-up question to that, which is how do you shine light on your people? You know, I'm trying to get you to give your secrets up. I mean, you just won an awesome award, so.
If you, I will send anybody our Sanborn package. If you look at our Sanborn package, there's specific bullets in that package that you can see. None of it is me. I got a senior select, actually puts on senior today, Senior Master Sergeant 𝗍𝗃 that won a Bronze Star. That's a big deal in our career field. So that's one of our bullets. The ATAC that I was talking about, that one of my GS9 battalion chiefs came up with this idea to institute ATAC, and he sold it to the commanders on base, and they bought in, and that's a really big deal. I got a guy that got a doctorate, Kerry Waddell. That's a big deal. My HSO, I have an amazing HSO, Rick Gurton, and he thinks outside the box. He got people in to do and I know other bases are doing this, but he started a cradle to grave program to where your dietary situation and your workout, bringing in people that show you how to lift so you don't hurt your back. And I mean, he was bringing these people in monthly to show us, hey, you know what, just because when you come into fire protection as an 18, 19, 20-year-old and you leave as a 50 or 60-year-old, your body's going to deteriorate, of course, because of age, but you shouldn't deteriorate any more than the average person because of your career field. My training guy, he's been a training guy since Christ was a corporal. I mean, he's been around forever. And, you know, disclaimer, I think all training guys in Air Force fire protection are the grumpiest people ever. I'm not sure why. But he's a grumpy guy, but I love him to death. He's a great training guy. And he all of these people that my battalion chief I got a GS8 who's a rock star, and he's always looking for different opportunities to author something or make our responses better. And nothing was me. And that's the great part about our package.
Well, Chief, I think you deserve some credit because it all starts at the top. You know, you set the tone with your attitude and kind of what you focus on. And people are going to follow that. So I got to give you credit. You got to take some credit for it. You know what I'm saying?
I tell everybody, they ask me, a couple of people ask me, how did you get everybody to gel and whatnot? I tell anybody all day long, I stay out of people's way. My job is not to walk into your office tomorrow, either one of you guys.
So that's the secret. That's the secret.
Stay out of people's way. People want to work. The people that do want to work, that want to come in and get the job done, they don't need you looming over their back, telling them what they're doing wrong every day, or telling them the way that I would do it. Just because I was a prevention guy, this is the way I would do it. I'm not going to do that. I stay out of their way. If you need me, you know where I sit. I'll walk out of the stalls and I'll communicate with guys all day long, but I'm not going to tell you the way that you should do things.
That's a lot of what you, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah. And a lot of what you said, it made me think of, I may have said it on another episode before, but I know I feel like I say it all the time. Opportunity and preparation. So when you're prepared and you have the opportunity, then things happen for you. It sounds like your department, in more ways than one, is always prepared, and you're ready to seize those opportunities when they come forward. And in the 2019, you had a lot of opportunities. You seized them all, and here you are.
Be open-minded. If you're a fire leader, a leader in the fire service in the Air Force right now, be open-minded. I come from the days where you did what you were told and you didn't ask any questions. But I was the Y airman, and anybody that's going to listen to this podcast that knew A1C Smith, that was an NCO at the time, is going to laugh, because they're going to say, yeah, I was the guy coming to work asking, why do we load the hose this way? We can do this load and it will come off 5 seconds faster. Why do we clean with Neverdol every single day versus why don't we do it once a week? Or no, I'm asking why about everything. And so I enjoy the why. If I have an A1C or a senior airman come into my office and say, hey, Chief, why do we do things this way? The first thing I'm going to do is tell them to read some of our founding documents, the SOC and our strategic plan and whatnot. And if they say, yeah, I've read all that, but I still don't understand why do we have to come to work for 48 hours? Why is it that way? So then I'm going to explain to them, or I'm going to, if they can't find it themselves, I'm going to explain it to them. But I enjoy the why. So if you give people the ability to fly and let them ask why they're flying, you'll extract everything possible out of that person. They'll want to work for you. They'll want to do everything they can to make sure that they don't let you down, because you give them the flexibility to be themselves and to lead, no matter what capacity they're in. Lowest ranking airman to the highest ranking person in that department, you give them the ability to lead. They're going to take that by the reins, and they're going to take some chances. Give them the opportunity to take some chances, take some risk, do some failure. If failure is not, only time you really can't fail in our profession is when you're on the fire ground. But let somebody come to work, and if somebody steps up and says, hey, you know what? I want to input the data for our strategic plan this year. Let them do it. If they don't do it to your liking, don't tell them that they didn't do it to your liking. Just explain it to them. Failure is okay.
Yeah, and a good principle is, if they didn't do it to your liking, but it was 80% of your liking, why not go with their product?
Yes.
And it's a way for you to show support for them.
Absolutely.
And maybe if it's 50% to you, like, hey, let me show you a couple extra things. I like what you did. Let me show you a couple more things. Now you get to that 80%. It's not a perfect product, but it still gets the job done. And then you show them that you trust.
Well, and there's only one way to be perfect, right? There's hundreds of ways to be great. And so, demanding perfection is never going to work out. 99.9% of the time, it's not going to work out, so.
Unless you're Michael Jordan. Well, I'm watching his Netflix series right now. And
yeah, that's a great show.
Yeah.
He had a lot of failure.
Yeah, he sure did.
He shot 53% over a lifetime, 54%.
Yeah, it was 7 years, 7 seasons before he got a championship. Kept losing to the Pistons, but we're kind of off track here. But
lots of failure.
Yeah.
So we talked about leadership. We talked about development. So I want you to talk directly to your up and coming fire chiefs now. Couple of 2 or 3 points of advice you could give anyone who aspires to be a fire chief, who's not quite there yet, but is looking to get there.
Anyone that's aspiring to be a fire chief right now, number one thing that you should do is build a very good network of individuals that you can call and get answers from. I've talked about these guys a few times within this podcast, but the disaster crew is definitely a group of members that I call a lot. and I lean on a lot to get a lot of information from. Collectively, those guys are a little older than me, so they have more experience than me. And with that, one of the best things that you can do is reach out across the DoD. Don't just talk to your friends in Air Force Fire Protection. Find out what the Navy's doing. You can get some good ideas from what the Navy's doing. One of my best friends is the fire chief for Army Fire Protection. I talk to him a lot. Army's doing some things right now that the Air Force isn't doing or we haven't thought about. And why can't we put that tool in our toolbox and see if our base leadership will let us run with it as well? We run into snags and we run into snags, but why aren't we talking to the other branches of the service to see how they're doing fire protection? So that's my number one thing. Build as big a network as you can of some people that know this career field from a different perspective. The number
people
two,
that challenge you too, right? That's
absolutely. Yeah. I think the disaster crew, we're challenging each other all the time because our perspectives are so different based on where we're from. And I mean, we talk a lot of personal stuff too, but our age differences are, one's a retired chief master sergeant. One got out and built his way up through the civilian DoD community, and two of us are retired master sergeants. And so different perspective all the way around. And yeah, we challenge each other. We've told each other, no, I wouldn't do things that way, or you're wrong. And it's kind of weird to see it happening, but you see it. So you're absolutely
It's awesome that you guys are that honest.
We are.
Yeah, those are true friends. They're going to tell you when they don't agree with you.
My number two thing is, we talked about a little earlier, don't be Johnny-come-lately. If you're trying to move up, the ranks of promotion within DoD Fire Protection or the city for that matter, if you're a senior airman right now and you're trying to get out and test for Dallas Fire Department, don't be Johnny-come-lately. And that means everything as simple as don't get a haircut and start shining your boots because a promotion's coming up. All the way to don't say you're going to get your CCAF or your associate's degree because that battalion chief position's coming open. Or don't say I'm going to go get my bachelor's degree because I know that the assistant chief of operations is going to retire in 3 months. You're Johnny-come-lately. When you start looking at people's stuff and setting them apart and saying, okay, this person just did it because there's an opportunity, kind of like you were saying earlier, versus opportunity and preparation have now met each other, and now it's time for you to get down. So don't be the Johnny-come-lately. Again, what my kid, Dr. Waddell, always talks about, he was applying for a bunch of jobs before he became what he is now. And a lot of people would always tell him, we like you, but you don't have this. We like you, but you don't have that. No one can tell that guy that anymore. They could just say, we don't like you, which is fine, but they can't say we like you, but it doesn't happen anymore for him. And then the last thing I would say for a fire chief up and coming is never be afraid to tell anyone where you came from. I was not the stellar airman. I had a lot of issues as an airman, a whole lot of issues. I apologize to my supervisors to this day. Even up until, like I said, I was a seasoned tech sergeant, Mr. Dotson at McConnell. I'm sorry. So there's don't be afraid to tell. I was not the perfect airman. I was not the perfect NCO. I was not the perfect senior NCO. I probably made some people mad in my career, not because I wanted to, just because I was being a jerk. So don't be afraid to tell people where you're from, and always look in the mirror. And if you do that as you're coming up throughout the career field, and realize that it's not always everybody else around you that's messed up. Sometimes it's you. Mm-hmm. Be able to look in the mirror and say, it's me. I'm messed up.
And I think the more transparent you are about stuff like that, the more respect that you get, the more people are going to listen to what you have to say.
Yep. One more thing. You got to have an amazing support system around you, right? If you're trying to do this at the highest level, and I'll bring her back on, you have to have an amazing support system. Because when this person said, hey, you know what? You have the opportunity to be the fire chief at Beale. It's going to keep us separated for another 4 years. Because I did get a job offer at Joint Base San Antonio, where she was in Houston, and she told me to stay at Beale. So people like this, if you're trying to make it, you got to have the support of people like this that are going to be in your corner.
And for our listeners who can't see the video, he's showing a camera towards his wife. So
Yeah, you have to have that support. And if you don't have it, then all three of us on this podcast have heard of people saying, hey, my spouse doesn't support me being in the military. They want me to get out, blah, blah, blah. I can't get promoted because of, whatever it is. You have to have that support. So my support system is I always tell her whenever we win a big award or something like that at Beale or even me personally, she's part of that win too. And she'll say, no, I'm not, I didn't do nothing. But the fact that she let me stay here and listens to all my crazy ideals and Saturday morning listens to me do a podcast, she's just as part of that win as anyone else.
Well, Chief, it's been so great talking with you today about, life, the job, everything in between. Wanted to give you the floor for any kind of final thoughts you might have to share.
One final thought is I'm always available. I've given my email out on this forum at Kevin.Smith.150 If you want some credentialing advice, if you want some education advice, if you want some fire advice, if you just want to send you a copy of one of our documents, our SOC or something like that, and anything like that, please reach out to me. Don't wait until it's too late to get yourself prepared to do what you want to do for your next step. I thank you guys. You guys are visionaries. It's nice to see what you guys brainchild come to fruition. You guys are definitely some visionaries, and I feel comfortable with the future of Air Force fire protection with guys like you doing this type of stuff. It makes my heart warm. So that's all I have.
Yep. Appreciate the kind words, Chief, and appreciate the support for the podcast for sure.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. And for our listeners out there, in addition to the methods, Chief Smith listed off, you can also find him on our FireDog mentorship. That's facebook.com/groups/FireDog mentorship. Yeah. And that'll take you to our page and you can click on mentors and Chief Smith's on there. So find him. Maybe not everyone at once.
I do have a disclaimer with that. I do have a few people that have reached out to me and we've had some communication. I'm very bad at texting back. I'm not as good at it as I should be, but I do try to keep in touch with everyone. What's happened is I started phone calling some of the people that have asked me to mentor them. We set up phone calls instead of the text messages back and forth, and it's helped out a lot. But yes, please reach out to me there also. I will coordinate. I'll correspond with you back and forth. And if it gets hot and heavy, then I'll certainly set up a phone call with you as well. So thank you for that opportunity. That's a great medium to communicate over. Maybe your first session is text just to get to know each other a little bit, but then, swap phone numbers and get on FaceTime, do something where you're actually connecting. Right. Well, Chief, again, it's been a pleasure having you on. I know Matt and I were looking forward to this episode and it's just been excellent. So thank you. And we'll talk to you next time. Thank you. Say hi to Chief K and Chief Rose.
Will do, Chief. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the FireDog Podcast. You can find more content just like this regularly posted to our Facebook page at facebook.com/the FireDog Podcast. That is facebook.com/the 𝗙𝗪𝗔 Podcast. Please remember to subscribe, rate, review, and share this podcast with your friends and coworkers. This has been Perry here with Matt Wilson and our guest, Chief Kevin Smith. Until next time, stay safe.